So now we have this really fun project we're going to conquer here in about 8 to 9 minutes. We're going to be able to use layering masks, what we just did in the previous video, and we're going to be able to make this effect possible. So I'm just going to zoom in so you can kind of get an idea of what we're going to be trying to do. We're going to be putting some objects above and some objects below to give it this really neat interactive feel. And you can see, since we're using typography with this, how you can really apply this to client work, commercial work, paid work. This is the kind of stuff that you can do for fun, but also the kind of stuff people love to see in their ads and paid work. So this is why I wanted to kind of include a project like this. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of delete all these layers, and we're going to start from scratch. So I was able to reset the typography. You can go ahead and download this file or be able to have access to the link where you can download it in the resource guide. I'm going to double click this font. I'm going to just share with you which ones I used. I used Archer Thin for this top font, and I wanted to do some font pairing, which is pairing together different types of font styles to give an interesting look. This is Dido. I know in the past I've said Dot, but it's actually pronounced Dido. I didn't know that until the other day. And then if we double click this is Azo Sans. So I use Azo Sans. I used that in the last video just to kind of let you know you can use whatever fonts you like. So I'll go ahead and zoom in. You already see some opportunities where we can put some things on top of the typography and leave some things behind it to give the layered effect. So I'm going to start up here with the fonts. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this one. And we're going to add our layering mask like we have been doing, and we are going to grab black, just pure black. And we're going to do a couple of different brushes, so I'm just going to continue to use the soft and hard round in different situations. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and reduce the transparency here so I can kind of see what's underneath. And right now I'm going to get a smaller brush, maybe 41 pixels. And I'm just going to use the feathered one on this. I think that'll have a little bit of a nicer look. Especially when you get down to the legs here. You can go very small. You don't have to be too precise, especially if it's going to be zoomed out, but you definitely want to have the most realistic look possible. So I'm just getting a small brush and doing the legs. Eee, there we go, there's the legs. So the ladybug is now above it. And so same thing, I think there's like a little ladybug down here. We go ahead and make him a little bit visible. Do his little antenna. Might need to do a really tiny brush for him. Maybe just 1 pixel and just go whoop. Just paint on a little antenna for him. And now we need to find the right thickness for that little piece of grass, little blade of grass here. And so I'm using the feather. It gives it a nice feathered look. It doesn't look too sharp when I cut it out. So now there's our little ladybug. And so you have little elements like this that can also be cut out. So that little thin line can be cut out. So I'm just going to get a 1 pixel. Go ahead and cut him out. Same thing with these little areas. We can get a little bit thicker and kind of just cut some of these areas out. Just moving around, I'm going to be cutting these out. Just using the feathered brush version. And if we mess up, we can always go back and paint with black if we cut too much away. Okay, pretty happy with that. We got this little guy right here we can cut out. Using the feathered brush and cutting it out. That has a nice look to it. So let's zoom out. I have this blade of grass. Let's do these 2 more areas. Let's paint that blade of grass through, and let's do that. That should probably be enough elements. Let's leave this underneath so it looks like it's going underneath the T and then going in front of the T. So it's kind of got that movement. Okay, so let's make it 100% to see how we like it. See if there's any opportunities to clean it up. Great, so kind of a really neat effect. So let's do the in and then the real quickly. So I'm going to zoom in, and I can already see some opportunities to cut some things out. So I'm going to need to add my layering mask, and I'm just going to cut out right there and right down here. It could be a lot of fun. I'm going to leave that behind so it goes in front, weaves behind, and then goes in front. Kind of gives it a nice look. And I believe this one, let me go ahead and make the N. That's a separate letter, so it's going to need its own layering mask. And I believe there's an opportunity here. Reduce the transparency quite a bit so I can get this little string. This is where I really wish I had my Wacom tablet. Mine broke a couple years ago. I have the iPad Pro, but haven't had a chance to connect it to Photoshop yet. I'm really missing it right now. Okay, so there we have that, those elements in there. So let's zoom out, and then we have one last thing to do. That's the wild. We're going to try to integrate him into the ground here so it looks like he's stuck into the ground, and we have some ground kind of coming up and covering him up. We're also going to do a reflection to make it look like the wild is reflecting into the water. Okay, so I have the wild. I'm going to reduce the opacity on him. One more layering mask to go. Added a layering mask and going to grab a pretty decent sized brush so I can kind of paint on the ground. So a couple things we could do. I have a soft round brush, so I can kind of do a softer cutout along the bottom. Okay, switch to see how that looks. So that has a certain look. It's a feathered look, but let's see what it looks like if I switch it to something hard. So doing a hard, it's not going to have any of the feathering. I'm going to kind of go down. I'm going to go up, down, kind of make it look like it's resting on uneven ground. And so we can switch that, and we can do a combination. So I did kind of a hard cutout there, but I can go and switch back to the soft round and make it a smaller brush just to give it a tiny bit of a feather. You can make it rough, so it's not just like a smooth cutout. Doesn't feel like it's going to be floating on nothing. There's like environment there that it's cutting out. And we can also, I'm not going to do this in the class, but if you wanted to do a transparency and do a couple of these twigs coming out, it'll help really integrate that wild into its environment. And so let's do kind of a quick reflection. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate that layer. And I'm going to hold down Shift and move down. If you have an older version of Photoshop, you don't have to hold down Shift, but the newer version of Photoshop will automatically scale it dimensionally. So I'm going to go ahead and line that up where I think it would be cast in the water. And I'm going to go ahead and go to Filter, Blur. I'm just going to do a Gaussian blur. Just going to give it a nice blur. And right now I have it on the layering mask. So I'm going to click on the layer instead of the layering mask. So I want to actually click on the core letter, character, typography, whatever you want to call it. So now I'm going to go back and try that again. So I'm going to go to Blur, Gaussian blur. We're going to need to rasterize our type. So let's go ahead and rasterize it. We don't need to retype it, so that's okay. Let's do a nice blur, enough where it looks like it's fading into the water. So it's going to be a pretty significant blur. So you see there how you could barely make out the letters, but you could tell it's from the letters. And we're going to do a blending mode on this. So let's find the right blending mode. We want to have the same color as the water underneath. So it's probably going to be soft light. So I put a soft light blending mode on it. So I'm going to toggle it off and on so you can kind of see. So that's this is going to be before, and this is after. So we're able to kind of really add a little bit of the reflection. So the next thing I would do is probably fine tune a little bit of this edges here and kind of paint with a little bit more detail, maybe find some rocks I can cut out and really zoom in and figure that out. But I had a little bit more time. But I really love kind of how this looks and how it just feels like it's a part of its environment. It's not just typography placed on top of a photo and you're done. You could be really creative with creating an advertisement, kind of using this method. And I'm going to show you a couple other examples on the screen to kind of share kind of a lot of wide variety of things you could play around with. I want you to play with this. I have a student project. If you wanted to take a stab at this and go ahead and take one simple word and find a way to weave it into the environment. Any photo of nature that you like, maybe one you've taken, maybe one you downloaded from pexels.com. I want to kind of see what you can do to practice those layering masks. You can do layering masks on anything. So not just typography, but people and animals and all sorts of things. It just helps you cut out things a lot quicker without having to cut out all these separate elements and having them as separate layers. This is a great non-destructive way to weave things in and out of its environment.